All right, we're here with Geraldine, and who I've been looking forward to having on for quite some time, and Rachel, my co-host, and Ellie, now a permanent co-host as well. Geraldine, with that said, I know you have you're involved in a lot of different topics, and I wouldn't even know where to start tonight without you really kicking us off yourself. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to discuss this evening.
So on October 13th of 2013, I had a conscious contact experience where a white light entered my room, and I was drawn out of my room on board a orb slash lenticular craft where I was introduced to all kinds of information. I was taken to the planet Maya in the Pleiadian Constellation, and I was introduced to children that were described as my own, as my children. They were hybrid children. And it was the first time I had come across the concept of aliens. Even though at that moment I began to recover memories of having had many experiences with them. It took several years to kind of integrate that experience. But as a result of that experience, I activated psychic abilities to the point where I could not leave my house for 4 months after that because of the level of sensitivity. I was even able to hear the conversation of the person a couple houses down the block. So I had to learn how to harness that ability, how to integrate it so I can, work and live a regular life. But once I was able to do that, I began to go deeper into the questions. And in 2017, I went under hypnotherapy where I began to completely recover all of these contact experience memories. And these regressions are public. You can listen to them to kind of understand the level of information that I was downloading at the time about the hybridization program. So at that point, I completely changed my life. I had a high end event planning company. I sold the business. I ended my partnership. And I went back to school to learn hypnotherapy and epigenetic psychotherapy because I began to understand that there's a very profound connection between the subconscious, our DNA, and our human experience. And I believe that that is a very important missing link of the ET phenomena, essentially, and the
Where I
hybridization.
became pregnant and I got a pregnancy test positive.
But even though her doctor confirmed Geraldine was exhibiting the signs of a miscarriage, there was no sign of the fetus.
Every time I would become pregnant, I would have a miscarriage or a miscarriage where there wouldn't be the fetus.
I was always quite psychic and always had abilities, but at this level, not at all. Everything was ripped wide open.
Now,
Um,
does anyone else in your family able to do that, or is it primarily you?
to the level that I have acquired after that experience, no. But my family is an experiencer family. Many of the members have had experience, and they are very intuitive as well. And it's a very spiritual family, so we're kind of all on that same
Well,
wave.
I ask you for a reason because after our experiences, ours was when I was very young,
Yeah.
my son actually was taken to a testing facility, and he tested higher than coincidental chance with respect to cobalt remote viewing. It got to the point where I was actually in a room with the doctor, and they had called him up on a telephone, speakerphone, in a conference room with another doctor, and they were asking him, am I holding up a water sign, a square, whatever it was, and he had nailed it so many times that it was beyond coincidental chance. And at
Wow.
one point, he hit like three, I think, in a row. And I was like, okay, this has got to be fixed, right? Like, how did you do that, son? And then later on, he started to have these abilities to, if there was something happening at the house and he was afar, he would be able to know that there was danger around the house or there was a car accident near the house, that kind of thing. So it wasn't me so much, but it was my son that developed the ability. So I'm wondering if that, I wouldn't say genetic, but if that was something embedded into our DNA that now, or something in our DNA was altered and our offspring were now the benefactor of that.
Do you mean like a kind of like a catalyst, like something to maybe cause the younger generations to activate that part of their DNA that causes the enhanced psychic ability?
That might not have been prevalent earlier and with his parents, per se.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, as a child, I as well had the experiences of being taken out of school and tested for these psychic abilities many times throughout my childhood. But it really wasn't something that I thought was out of the norm until I began to understand the contact phenomena. Psychic abilities are passed down through generations, and they do tend to be activated at certain points in the development of the child or the young adult. So, this is definitely something that is passed down, but um, that aside, every single human is psychic, has the ability to connect telepathically, to remote view, to, connect through quantum non-locality and through our entanglement.
If you're younger, do you have a higher chance of achieving the psychic abilities and, maybe even connecting with your ancestral DNA than someone who's maybe like older?
I
Is
think
there
so.
Yeah, so one of the things that resulted in the activation of of these abilities was the ability to see the multidimensional body in its full complexity. So I'm able to see and merge with the person to see all the chakra system, how the energy is moving, the emotional, the DNA information that is available there, and then of course all of the other dimensional realms that are expressed from a being. So it really helped me kind of understand the structures of the architecture of our multidimensional body, really. So how we actually function is that when we're born, we're pretty quite open, and within the womb until the age of 7, we're fully developing the chakra system, the energy system, the 7 main chakras of the body. Each one of these chakras is connected to memory. So a child will have a lot of past life memories, that is coming into them. It's very readily available, and they're very open, so they can sense energy. As you mentioned, the child can sense when there's danger. So those kinds of like ultrasensory abilities are something that are available to the child. But due to programming, trauma, conditioning, all of that starts to kind of dim down as the child begins to develop a personality.
do you see any pattern of like when the personality starts forming that will limit the child and their abilities?
Yeah, I've heard that a child by the time he's 6 years old has pretty much taken on his personality. Younger, you have all these telomeres and stem cells and things that are working in overtime.
Collagen,
And
yeah.
so there's this big switch in between developing and then all of a sudden stalling and then going in the other direction. And so I wonder if that plays a part. There's an interest there why younger people typically are taken.
Memories which the child can bring on from past lives might contribute to a personality, the personality that's being developed from the person. So they might have a strong affinity, for example, to certain star systems or airplanes or things like this. And those are memories from other simultaneous lifetimes that the child has a lot of access to because they're so open, and that might contribute to the personality. So to answer your question about the aging, I don't really prescribe to the idea that we actually are kind of dying at the age of 20, and here's why. I think that's a pretty deep program that we're kind of told is true, because in reality telomeres can be grown, they can be extended by the production of telomerase. And telomerase scientifically has been shown to develop, and it's an enzyme that we create when the body comes into its most optimum function of the 0 point. Okay, what is the 0 point? It's a state of internal harmony, nervous system regulation, the ability to come into a non judgmental observation internally and externally.
What would your advice be to somebody who has something like an autoimmune condition, and how can they obtain that sort of health and vitality?
Absolutely. So there's a couple parts to illnesses. Illnesses really have a very deep somatic root, but some of these illnesses, if it's an autoimmune disease that is passed down through the generations, it means that we're repeating certain ancestral programming that has to be addressed. That would have to be the root and the focus for healing. So whatever we are repeating that creates an environment in order for the immune system to drop every time, that is what we need to address. And those are usually really high stress, inflammatory chemical production in the body that is, produced over habits, behavioral habits. So that's something epigenetically that we can address. Some souls choose to incarnate in bodies that have a lot of illness because ancestrally we have repeated the same trauma and blockage so many times that this soul that now incarnates in the bloodline is designed to overcome that.
Do souls actually have an attraction or magnetism to a certain DNA lineage before they incarnate? And if they do, is it because they're magnetized and don't have a choice, or are they choosing it because they want that experience, because they want a certain, I guess, function or purpose, and they want to reach a certain goal?
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely. So what I've kind of come to understand is that the entire ancestral lineage. Imagine the entire ancestral lineage as a body of consciousness. That body of consciousness is evolving, and the lineage is not individual. It's united as one to the entire human race because the entire human race is also a body of consciousness that's evolving in the same way that the planet Earth is evolving in the solar system. So. In this bodies, we call forth the soul that has experiences, that is experiencing in alternate timelines, receiving the tools, the understanding, the evolutionary timeline process to be able to help this body of consciousness move forward. Every soul is like called forth. It is a certain magnetism, resonance, really bioelectrically, we become resonant to certain bloodlines and we are born and incarnated. So I do see that we also tend to reincarnate in these bloodlines many lifetimes until we transcend the lesson, and that is by choice. There is a certain level of free will there. When the human finally decides to embody its full potential, usually what I notice is that the soul will go and choose another experience. It can be on Earth, on another lineage, or it can be just in another construct entirely.
So I totally subscribe with the positive mind, positive thinking, positive things happen to positive people, and that affects your mind, spirit, and body. But what happens when there's a lot of people that grow up in a situation or a victim of their environment where they're surrounded by negativity, that the life stinks, and they start to feel sick. They start to You can see that in people. People who have good lives, they tend to live longer and they look better. Their skin looks better versus those under a lot of stress. So there's a lot of truth there. But what do you say about the P53 gene, which causes cancer if it fails? I mean, how do you, once you are involved in at a certain level of life where you're being affected so much that you are starting to have medical problems, you're starting to see and feel that things aren't going well. How would you address failing genes or chromosomes, things that your body needs and requires to regenerate? So I've got a friend of mine in Orlando who's big on stem cell surgery or injections and that kind of thing, and he swears by it. And he looks like he's 20 years old and he's in his 50s, but
wow.
he also, I think, abuses them a little bit. He's constantly joints, legs, So what happens when he runs out of stem cells? But my question to you is, there is truth that your body does start to fail after a while, but I think that is more specific to certain people. I think people who are stressed and have busy, nonstop lives and they're tired, their bodies start to wear, and it's hard to be positive, right? It's hard to think positive. It's hard to generally be positive. So when my son was having some work issues, employment issues and that kind of thing, I said, don't say anything negative because your ears hear it. Ears will hear the negative things you say. And so you're creating a negative environment from your own self.
Right.
So look at everything as a half full type of thing. Try to find a positive spin. And he has been doing better because of the way he's programmed himself to think.
We can literally turn those gene markers on and off based on the environment that we're creating biochemically and bioelectrically in the body. What we learn is that when we come into a state of harmony, when we learn how to regulate the nervous system, we actually can optimize the function of our brain. We can optimize the function of DNA expression, which means that we can optimize how we are using, the immune system, how it's collaborating with different parts of our body. Because we are a bioelectrical network, the entire body is actually like a brain. It's a one brain system that interconnected, that is communicating. So whenever we lose consciousness of any part of our body, we really kind of we fall asleep in that part of us. And if we are already getting biochemical reward and signals from our cell phones to the point where that is a necessary habit in our day, we are already training ourselves to become transhumanists. So, of course, we're going to have all kinds of illnesses overrunning our physical body because we're deeply disconnected from that
Where
system.
would you say the state of joy fits in? When you mentioned like the Buddhists, the Taoists, the Zen, they talk about joy a lot. Even some old, more esoteric branches of Christianity mention joy. And joy is not being happy. It's not a chemical reaction where you're like just giggling and you're high or whatever. It's actually a state of being, and your emotions could be all across the spectrum, but you're in a state of joy. And they were saying that joy plays a big role in your health and even in how resistant you are to certain thought forms, to certain diseases, to certain alterings of the DNA, even psychic attacks. Um, where do you see joy playing a role in being able to maybe restructure your DNA or being able to resist illness? What would you say?
Yeah, so we kind of have different levels of consciousness. And when we exist in a closer state of separation, so me and the other, or I'm alone, or I'm separate, a lot of these belief systems of separation subconsciously create a disruption in our own ability to become conductive bioelectrically. Okay, so those are thought belief systems that become parasitic towards ourselves. So we're worried about psychic attacks and parasites, but in reality, the only way that we can be in resonance with those things is if we become parasitic with ourselves to begin with. So, for example, we don't love ourselves, we don't accept, we feel unworthy, we feel lonely, we feel disconnected, isolated. All of those belief systems, they're not just belief systems. We are, your entire body is a toroidal field of energy that's made up of millions of micro vortices. Every cell of your body is a vortex. Every chakra, energy center is a vortex. And it's processing vibrational frequency data of your environment inside out. We're communicating. So anytime that we become disconnected, we don't know what's happening in our body. So that aside, to be able to open these systems of this toroidal field, we have to allow life force to move through. What happens is that we create thought forms that are blocked. So let's say we have an experience as a child that's a trauma. This trauma is a neural pathway, which we now reinforce. And we reinforce over and over again, but energetically in our etheric body, this is also a thought form. It's an energetic point that begins to crystallize over time. And it creates energetic blockages that in the chakra system that blocks how energy is moving. Let me just show you this really cool toy I just got, which I'm so excited about. But see, the chakras are like this. So if any time we have a thought form that begins to crystallize, it blocks the flow of this toroidal movement in the body. So
Nice. I like that.
we want to open up those blockages to allow life force to move.
You were in a Travel Channel show with me, and I think I was in it as well because of my connection to my son and how he has turned out to be exceptional in a lot of ways. And then, of course, your experience. So I have a couple clips here.
That aliens actually presented her to her alien human children.
And as I'm looking at these children and I see what they look like, they're not all the way human. This gray, thin skin, it's a much bigger head. And these giant eyes that are so deep and so profound and so complex. It was just incredible. But what I recognized as I'm meeting the child is that it's my child. It looks like me. It has something that is a part of me.
Mom or grandma experienced similar things?
I remember what I believed to be my mother calling for me, screaming.
As a father, I can tell you that that's pretty heartbreaking to me. I would want to do everything I could to try and find out why. You're saying it looked like an insectoid, sort of ant-like head?
Yes, I got a picture of it actually in my case.
Why don't you pull that out for us?
This is a very good depiction, and my brother and I paid a fortune to have this done.
Oh,
Do you think that possibly that there's a connection or a tie to the human DNA and how we are able to do these things, and how maybe some of that was lost in our late ancestors, and or if they are our ancestors with respect to ET? And do you think that that is possibly, being that you're so upfront and aware of these emotions and how to better yourself through mind and spirit, do you think that played a part in the interest in you personally and or your offspring? My brother's children, they are exceptional. And my son is like absolutely, he tested 172 with an IQ test.
Wow.
And, I like to think I'm fairly bright, but if you had met his mother, he certainly didn't get it from her. So I'm like, where did he
Hi.
get this from, right? I mean, how did he like become like so? When he was like 8 or 10 years old, we would drive by a Subway, and he would be able to tell me how much the franchise was, that kind of thing. And so there are things that we were just like, I don't know how he would know the things that he does, and of course the testing. And so that again is why I'm very interested, or take a big interest in, and how we get to this point, and what we're so much more advanced and so much more intricate as human species than people realize.
Absolutely.
And we neglect ourselves, and we abuse ourselves, and we, in a lot of ways, are mentally abused just by going to work sometimes, and the stress. We weren't meant to go through all that, and then we wonder why we get ill.
Oh, yes. Well,
Ooh.
actually, my research has kind of found that we are hybrid. We are hybridized from many of these ET races, and we are also creating hybrids on this planet. Our children are also hybrids. So our creative potential is incredible. When we talk about the hybridization program, it's not the creation of a baby, it's the creation of a soul, and that soul can take any form. That's the incredible beauty that the human power has of creating. So we have to honor that and learn to love truly, unconditionally in the work that we're doing here as humans.
I hope this answered Rachel's question. Do you have anything, Rachel? Because you're the one who started this whole conversation.
I did. I was like, when? I mean, I've got a million, but
We got
we
a couple.
really don't have the time.
We got a
I
few
know that
minutes.
you mentioned a lot about genomics in your last. So I wondered if you could like briefly explain a little bit about what you mean by that. And like, I think you specifically were talking about genomics and the use of like AI.
Yeah, so we don't know how much time we have, but I'll try to make it really short. Since World War II and even before that, so think of it this way: we are a hybridized race, which means that our DNA has a plethora of species that are available to us as a portal to access that memory. What is important, what is valuable about DNA is that it's a composite of memories of many species, many generations that have existed. Since World War II, there has been an interest in kind of managing those races, those bloodlines. It's really the origin of time, from the origin in Mesopotamia. There have been certain bloodlines that have been kind of utilized for using the information away from regular average human race. So these tools of sexual alchemy, for example, how to create with pure love, has been inverted by the church and by many other systems that manipulate that understanding. And that's caused a problem in the planet Earth, because we're kind of enslaved by our lower creative potential than rather our higher. So there is a certain kind of a silent eugenics agenda, essentially, that kind of imposes on our DNA artificial chemicals to destruct our pure code, the health of our bodies, our minds, our spiritual evolution, slowing down that process. When the human begins to understand that, we break away from those systems. And that's the thing that we need to pay attention to. Now that AI and DNA research has completely merged, we can sequence an entire DNA and understand the ancestral history completely. So that is another level of power that we have not seen yet in our generation. So that's something that we need to understand. And the knowledge that they have is knowledge that you have access to by meditating and connecting
As I
with
looked down at
yourself.
my phone, it says 3:30 in the morning. And part of me was a little bit afraid at that moment, because it was thinking, oh, is there someone outside my window? So I look outside my window, and the light is so bright that it's burning my eyes. And next thing I know, my entire body paralyzes. And I feel my body being taken through the window. I was brought to a craft. I was paralyzed. This being comes next to me, and I'm terrified at this point, but I can't even scream.
Geraldine, I can't thank you enough for tonight. Rachel, do you have any
Thank
last
you.
minute questions? Because we had another show in 6 minutes.
No, that's good. We'll come back and we'll talk.